here. I just want to remind you all about the golden thread. So at the top of our strategic triangle, there's a single word, patients. And right at the very bottom, the way we do all our improvements is the Leeds Improvement Method. So there's that golden thread that goes all the way down. Please remember that as we're going through this. So 3 presentations, then 8 minutes at the end for questions. I said 8 minutes just to focus you all on timing. Off you go, Neurosciences.
I'm just struggling to get myself off mute. Hello, my name's Katie Hodge. I'm one of the matrons, the lead for Neurosciences, complaints and PALS and patient experience currently sit under my quality portfolio. We commenced this piece of work in conjunction with the complaints and patient experience team with the hope of not only improving patient experience, but the quality of our complaint responses and also staff satisfaction. Next slide, please. You're on mute, Joe.
Apologies, technology. So I'm Jo Corrigan, lead nurse for patient experience, and we've been working with Neurosciences, as Katie has said. So since the last report out, the process for capturing the initial concerns of complainants has been implemented, and this was started in December last year. The CSU received 5 complaints throughout the time to date. 3 of the 5 have been through the new process. 1 had requested to correspond via email, and the concerns were drawn from the complaint letter only and sent back to the complainant for confirmation. The second complainant didn't want to engage in the process and didn't want a telephone discussion. And 2 out of 5 of these concerns have now been closed. Using the newly developed SOP and documentation for correspondence and communication with a complainant, the handler that has been dealing with this has captured the complainant's concerns through a telephone conversation, and the average length of these telephone conversations have been around 25 minutes. The process is all being explained to the complainant, a written document's then sent to them, and it's sent back to the handler for confirmation. And once that's received, then the clock starts ticking on the process, as it would in the usual complaint process. Whilst the initial conversations with complainants were longer in duration, the handler did find this really helpful and were able to build up relationships with the complainants and gain the confidence by listening to them. And this resulted in helping the complaints team and CSUs manage the expectations of the complainants as they went through the process. The completed documentation that we send through to the neuro team as well supports a swift redirection of investigation process for them when it's received, so they can send it to the right person. And the responses that we've received back as well, the initial responses, have been of a higher quality, which has resulted in removal of the quality assurance process and checks for single CSU complaints. So overall, the change has been positive for both the CSU and the complaints team. However, we've got to recognise that it is a really small number, and it's difficult to measure and assess the reopened defect rates at this time. Next slide, please.
PDSA2 was looking at our diary entries. We were just very cognizant going into this process that we are an operational team, and that when we're looking at complaint responses, these have to align with clinical teams' roles and responsibilities. A lot of our colleagues have planned scheduled theatre lists, and in line with the NHS England work that we're undertaking, we really needed to make it a priority to carve out work for our clinical teams. And we've had good engagement. So the LIM process was shared via different formats, from our medical specialities to our surgical specialities, with good engagement. We've embedded the process well with the diary entries, and it's also strengthened our partnership working with the business and matron team to ensure that they're allocating time for our clinical colleagues to produce timely complaint response. The effect that this has had is that we are seeing better and more robust responses from our clinical teams, and because they've also been created and co-produced with myself at the moment, but that's a format that we're going to expand. The benefits of co-production of a complaint response is one, that we can do a live type in, and secondary, I can ask the more basic questions that I might come back to them, not necessarily sat within my speciality. We've also created a new format as to how complaint responses are sent out to clinical staff, and it's again more user friendly. I think we've chalking off time that individuals are using to delve into the complaint responses, just making it more user friendly process. From a co-production point of view, it does state that we've not co-produced one. However, I can report from this week we have co-produced a complaint response, and it was back out within 24 hours. So actually, from an efficacy point of view, it is working. Next slide, please.
Hello, my name is Rosie Horsman and I'm lead nurse for patient experience like Joe, and I have responsibility for the PALS service. And this PDSA piece of work is sort of based on the premise that the fewer PALS we get, the fewer are going to convert to formal complaints, and therefore the number of complaints that we get will be lower, and so the quality of our complaint handling will improve. So we've already put into place a default position whereby if a PALS comes in and it relates only to waiting times or only to difficulty contacting the department or only both issues together, rather than it being processed, as a PALS, it's been processed as an advice inquiry, and we are contacting the CSU directly to ask them to contact the complainant as soon as possible to try and resolve it locally before it becomes a PALS issue. We are currently in the process of putting together a script that the PALS team can use to try to have a conversation with the patient which will prevent them from raising a PALS. And people often ring the department because they're not clear where they are on the waiting list and they want to know and they're anxious and all those kinds of things. And if we can reassure them that they're on the waiting list and give them certain basic information, then often they don't go on to raise a PALS. It's just really, really important that we get that language right, because we find in the PALS service that quite often people complain about admin staff and medical secretaries and schedulers talking to them about priorities, and that never lands well with patients, because of course their operation is their priority. If you're living with chronic back pain and it's affecting every single area of your life, it's a priority for you. But we are nearly there with the script, and we are hoping to get going with that next week. And that script will just outline current wait times, what Neuro are doing as a CSU to reduce waiting times, because people always like to hear about that. We know from work we've done earlier in gynaecology. Information about what to do if your condition is worsening, going back to your GP and getting an expedite letter. And finally, we are providing the best times of day to telephone the department, and also email addresses for both waiting list waits and inpatient operation waits, just to try and stop the fairly large number of PALS that we have at the moment that relate to not being able to contact the department. So that's where we are with that. Initially, because we had already started doing a lot more advice inquiries, we did see quite a reduction. But unfortunately, in January and February, we have had an increase across the board of PALS coming through the service, a really significant increase. So obviously part of that increase, it looks more or less proportional. Part of that increase means that there's been a little bit of an increase again in Neurosciences PALS. Next slide, please.
Hi everyone, my name's James Davis Ingram, an information analyst. I work in the patient experience team. I'm just going to talk through the target progress report. So firstly, lead time. This is the median time in working days from when the CSU and Katie's team receive the complaint, and then the time it takes to send them back their draft response to the complaint. There's 3 different target times for complaints: 20, 40 or 60 working days, depending on complexity. And each CSU has an internal target to meet of 12, 27 and 45 working days alongside those, aligned to those final timescales. So for this report out period, we've seen Neuro achieve a 19 working day median time against the 27 working day target, which is fantastic. So it's both on target and reduced against the baseline by 16 working days. There's most of these complaints are 40 working day complaints, but there were I think 2 60 working day complaints within the time frame at this report out, and one of those was 1 working day over the baseline, so it's showing as red there, but actually it's still on target, so that's good, and it's the same as the position before, which was also on target. And then the defect rate. Now, this is the percentage of responses that are sent out where neurosciences were involved, but has been reopened. The complainants come back and raise concern about the response or further questions. But this is only those that have been reopened for what is a defect reason. So this would be something like a question not answered by the response. The baseline was 7% and the target's 0, and the actual performance throughout has been 0% so far. So that's really positive again. But as Joe noted earlier, there's always the potential that will mature over time, because complainants don't always come back straight away to raise those further concerns. And then the third quality metric is the percentage of complaints that are new to the service that have come from an unresolved PALS. So the types of concerns that Rosie was talking about there. The baseline is 35% for this, the target's 20%, and at the 90-day point we're at 30%. So that was 3 out of 10 new complaints for neurosciences that came in from an unresolved PALS. So that's been consistent. It is still over target, over the 20% target, but it is a 5% improvement on the baseline, again positive. And finally, a really positive result for the staff feedback involved in the complaints process in neurosciences, which was a plus 59.5%. Thank you. Next slide, please.
So the next steps from this are certainly the complaints team are looking to roll out the capturing of initial concerns to other CSUs, and we'll be in discussions with CSUs to pick this up. And we have also scheduled in a sharing event to share the improvement work and the experiences of both neurosciences and the complaints in April, and teams will be invited to that. Next slide, please.
And the final slide is just our car park for reference. So we're out at the end of our initial meetings, a lot of things that we wanted to address that were out of our scope. And it's just to demonstrate that, I think we've got a really cohesive working relationship with the patient experience team, and also things have been escalated up to senior management. And the hope is moving forward that we'll continue to build on these improvements and also utilise some potential ideas for ongoing work. Thank you very much.
Have we got Hannah on the call?
Yes, hello.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm the ward manager for the High Observation Unit in TRS, and I've been looking at reducing the length of stay for our DIEP flat patients, aiming for 70% of patients to be discharged home by day 3. Next slide, please. So a bit of background: the DIEPs patients come to our units because they need high levels of monitoring. We check the flap observations every 15 minutes for 4 hours, then half hourly, then hourly, just to ensure if any changes were to happen, the patients would be escalated immediately to medics due to the microsurgery. We're very passionate about the care we provide on our unit, and I attended a conference to gain more insight of what other areas we're doing, which made me aware that other units and trusts were discharging patients home much sooner than we were in Leeds. Looking at the 7 commitments, this project links to reducing patient waits as the length of time in hospital is reduced, promoting recovery at home and freeing up beds for other patients. This in turn will allow for more surgeries to be performed and reduce waiting lists. I undertook an audit looking at our current length of stay for the patient group and looked at ways to support my plan. Next slide, please. I reviewed the post-operative protocol created by the consultants, and using this created a standard work for the nursing staff to complete, which involves early mobilisation, removing lines and catheters early, adequate analgesia and a lot of support, as these ladies have been through a lot mentally and emotionally prior to coming into hospital. I created a survey to ask patients about their experiences and what could be improved. I used a process flow chart and looked at the areas to improve and used the Tim Woods model to assess for any waste in the processes. The spaghetti diagram was not effective as the care for the patient starts in clinic and ends on the ward, so the different areas wouldn't have worked. And the consultants were really keen to reduce the length of stay as are the nursing staff, and there's been no issues raised at the time of writing. Next slide, please. So following streamlining the protocol and support from the consultants, this graph shows the data from 6 months after the LIM course. So we've improved discharge on our unit home to 3 days or less by 33%. So it was 45% before the course and 78% after. So that's a really great achievement, and we're all really proud of that. Next slide, please. So the uptake from nursing staff, especially those caring for the patient group on the first night post-op, is where all the key tasks are undertaken. So it's really good that the team are really on board with the changes that I've made. The consultants are really happy for all the plans that we've done and happy for any changes if it improves patient experience. And the junior doctors and the fellows specialising in breast surgery have also been really keen to get people home quicker. So next slide, please. What I would do differently would be to allocate time each week to collect data and make sure the process is easier compared to having to collect in one go, which is quite time consuming. I collected data from 2021 to current, so it took quite a while looking at all our admissions. I've learned how adaptable my team are and how keen they are to improve patient experience, and I've taken all the changes in their stride. I've also learned how appreciative the patients are for the care they receive, which is a real boost to the team and is encouraging for us to continue to provide excellent care. And the next steps would be to create a patient information leaflet and get it approved in governance, and present to the plastics consultants how the care has been improved and present in audit. I need to do an audit action plan and pain management, and potentially create an enhanced recovery protocol, and then use a balance measure to assess if any failed discharges occurred within this patient group. That's it, thank you.
Did anybody hear any of that? Sorry. Hannah, really good work. Victoria, you're on.
Thank you. So my name is Victoria Bentley and I'm the Senior Sister on Ward L16, which is the Cardiac Surgical Ward at Leeds General Infirmary. And my work was just to talk about the patient's voice and can it make a difference and will it make a difference? Next slide, please. So the problem for us is that we have patients waiting for urgent inpatient cardiac surgery. Some of those patients can wait quite a long time for that surgery. It can be up to 8 weeks and occasionally longer. This is time spent in Leeds or any of the local Yorkshire hospitals that feed into our service. And this leads to frustrated local hospital services who can't get their patients across to Leeds, patients that are very frustrated and their families, and a general frustration amongst the staff that are caring for these patients that these patients are waiting a long time for surgery. So the gold standard would be for urgent referral to surgery of a week, and unfortunately we're not meeting this target. So we have a group of patients who experience frequent cancellations and are often given wrong or misleading information through no fault of anybody. It's just trying to update them, give them information that then turns out to be incorrect. So the link to the Trust 7 Cs, if we could do something to work through this, would be that there would certainly be an improvement in the pathway for these patients, which would help us contribute to delivering the financial plan for the Trust. There'd be less frustrated patients and families, which would make the ward environment better. There'd be a better group of patients that wouldn't be quite so upset, which would definitely lead to improvements in staff morale. And we could certainly reduce the average length of stay by half a day, if not a lot more, if we could make this work a little bit better. Next slide, please. So it's been a problem for a while, and I've thought about different ways of tackling it, and then did the Leeds Improvement Method training. So my first thing that I did was a questionnaire to a group of patients that were waiting on the ward at the time. So I gave them all a questionnaire and also gave the staff a questionnaire as well. So this, I involved the Trust Patient Experience team, and we actually made a video of 2 patients and their experience. Unfortunately, we had some technical issues, so actually only one of the videos worked, and that was on the second recording. But this allowed them to tell us what it was like to be a patient waiting for inpatient surgery. And it was quite insightful, really, to hear that. My aim is to use these videos to highlight to those who don't have the face-to-face contact that we as a ward team have, what the wait feels like, because it's not a pleasant thing for them. And I hope this insight that when it's shared will help motivate a change throughout the whole of the team to make this experience better. So LIM tools, I mean, I work on the Gemba, I see these patients day in and day out, so I know what it feels like for them, and I've also had a lot of conversations about this with other members of the team as well. I've talked to staff, given them a questionnaire to see what it feels like for them to look after these patients, because that can be quite difficult and challenging as well. We did a bit of a test of change, which was to try and record the patient's voice, which was then to use to demonstrate to anyone that would listen, really, that was interested, to what it feels like to be an urgent inpatient waiting for surgery. We've got a process flow chart and involves sort of how scheduling decisions are being made. And actually, scheduling is in our car park from a previous piece of work, but there is a date for that event now to go forward, so that will hopefully help. And PDSA to how to move forward. All the tools that were generated were really well received from the team, because they also feel the same as I do about the patients. So there was good engagement from the ward team. Next slide, please. So unfortunately, I had a knee replacement last year, so I had a period of time off work. So the works have taken a bit longer than I expected it to. So I've not actually used this for this. I'm going to show the video shortly, but it'll be the first time that anyone's actually seen the video. So it'll be good to get your feedback. So I do plan to use this at one of our governance meetings, just to highlight what it feels like, really. And I'm going to show in a minute, we've done a recent event on communication, a Kaizen event. So some of that links into this. And like I said, scheduling's already in the car park, but it is something that we're now going to bring forward. Next slide, please. So this is some of the communication work that we've done from a recent communication event with Cardiac ICU, and it's about communication and how we can improve flow from intensive care to the ward, which will hopefully ultimately mean that there are fewer cancellations going forward. Next slide, please. And this is just the value stream that we did for elective patients. So we have the elective pathway and the urgent pathway. So the elective pathway is quite extensive. As you can see, it's not all fitted on that slide. So the urgent pathway is even more complex than this one, just to show sort of what the work involved is. So I'm going to show the video now of the patient, please.
Do we need to click on the link? Apologies.
I'm not sure.
I don't know who's driving, Victoria.
It's one of the KPO team. I'm not sure whether we.
Madupe, are you able to click on the link? Looks like there might be some technical issues, Victoria. Sorry about that. Can we share the link in the chat afterwards so that everybody can still look at that and view it?
Yeah, that's a shame.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So if we can move on to my next slide then, please. So, like I said, the team effort and the patient involvement was really well. The patients wanted to speak. We talk about PALS all the time for our group of patients, but they never want to put PALS in because they feel it will impact on their wait for surgery and they might be doing something wrong. So it was just trying a way of capture their information, really. So they were all really pleased and happy that I was listening to them and trying to take their voices forward. And the staff the same, you know, the staff want this to be shared as well. So they're full of encouragement and continuing of this work. Next slide, please. So we can just go back. So differently, unfortunately, the first two videos that we did were really, really good and had a real impact. But because of the technical failure that we had of the computer, they ended up doing the videos after the patients had the surgery rather than while they were waiting. So it was quite a different perspective then once they'd already had the surgery. So that was a shame. And if I did it again, I would do that differently. Key learning. We need to make a change to make the patients have a better experience. Next steps would be to make this big. I want this to have an impact and for us to try and make things better for these patients. And my aim is to engage the team in trying to make that happen as well. And since I've done the slides, I'm going to try and make a patient information leaflet just to manage the expectations of the patients that are waiting. Next slide, please. And that's it.
Victoria, thank you. Can I just say 3 great presentations? So if you're waiting for a complaint resolution, if you're waiting to go home following your DIEP procedure, or you're waiting in hospital to have cardiac surgery, using that Leeds Improvement methodology, massive impact for patient experience. There's a whole load of other ancillary benefits. We don't need to talk about those. Focus on the patients, significant benefits. Claire Smith has a hand in the air.
I do. I thought they were excellent. I think that with the DIEP work in particular as well, I think we've got thinking about our commitments going into next year and supporting our patients to go home sooner. And I am most definitely going to be knocking on your door in order for you to showcase that work across the organisation as well. But just that last piece that you said at the end there about patients sometimes saying that they don't want to speak up in case it impacts on their care. I hear that quite a bit. I hear that from family members, never mind patients that are actually within our care. And I think there's a lot of people on this call, and certainly as a senior leader, need to really think about how we communicate with our patients so that they feel as though they've got a safe space in which they can do that. And I know we've got the PALS system and we've got all of those things, but how do we do that so that they don't feel as though they are somehow going to be penalised or they're going to have a worse outcome or care because they've had the audacity to speak up. And it makes me really sad that people feel like that.
Agree, Claire. If we're going to be outstanding, it needs to be a safe space for everybody to speak up. Patients and our colleagues. Can I just ask any other questions, comments? We've got a minute to go. If there aren't any, I'm not going to milk this. Thank you to all the presenters, not only for the presentations today, but for all your hard work around the improvements that you've made. Thank you for taking the time to think about them and actually put them into action. 3 great presentations. Absolute credit to LTHT. Have a fabulous Friday and good weekends.